Hey everybody, what's going on? Today we're going to be looking at 10.5. So go ahead and take your notes and we'll get started on this, okay? So it says factor each expression completely if needed. Draw a rectangular area model if it may help you. Alright, so like I said, what we did on the previous ones, remember we have this little X thing to help organize our work, and we're looking for things to multiply to AC and add to my B value. So my B value is 10, and I got these two values of 1 times 24, which is 24. So you basically look at the factors of 24, and you see which one of these would add to a positive 10. So I know both of my values are positive. So I got 24 and 1, 12 and 2, 3 and 8, and then 4 and 6. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. These both add to right here. So we got 6 and 4. So when I put my values here, I got x squared, 4x, 6x, and 24. My C value goes here. So when I start to pull stuff out, or start right here on this first column, I pull out an x. Here I can factor out a 4. Here I could factor out an x. And here I'd factor out a 6 to get my x minus 4, plus 4, and x plus 6. Okay? Alright, so let's go and look at this next one. I'm looking for values that multiply to 18 and add to negative 9. So when I look at this, I got, 18 and 1, 9 and 2. Oh, and since I'm multiplying these, and it multiplies to a positive and adds to a negative, I know that these are both negative. Alright, so let's continue. I got 3 and 6, and there you go. When I add both those together, I'll get negative 9. So I got negative 6 and negative 3, and we actually don't need to use this little factor box here until I have a coefficient other than 1. So I know my factors here are just x minus 6 and x minus 3. Okay? Alright, next one on the warm-up, I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 20, negative 20, and add to negative 1. Now really quickly guys, I know that when they're multiplying, they add to a, multiply to a negative 20, so I know one's positive and one's negative. And I know when I add the two values together, that I end up with a negative value, so I know the bigger one's negative. So if I have like negative 20 and positive 1, negative 10, positive 2, so on and so forth, you'll see negative 5, positive 4, and you're like, oh, when I add these together, that is what is going to give me negative 1. So then my two factors here would be x minus 5 and x plus 4. Okay? All right, last one here. I got values that multiply to negative 16, add to positive 6. My B value is positive, and my C value is negative, so I know the bigger value is positive and my smaller value is negative. So when I look at these, then I'm going to have 16 and 1, and then 8 and negative 2, and you're like, oh, right here when I add these together, that'll give me positive 6. So I'd have 8 and negative 2. So then my factors would be x plus 8 and x minus 2. So hopefully we've gotten used to factoring these now, and we can jump to a little bit more complicated ones. So what we're going to do is look at 10.5 strange quilts, and we're actually going to be jumping ahead of number 1, and we're going to end up looking at number 2. So now this is the first time we're really looking at something a little bit more tricky, where these boxes will come in handy, solving them without with these little boxes, with the factor box. Okay, so when I look at this, let me go and shrink it down really quickly. That works for right now. So when I go ahead then and look at this, what I want to do is same idea. I'm looking at my A value and my C value. So it says, suppose someone wants an area of this. Well, what we would do, remember this is A times C, so 3 times 20 is 60. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 60 and add to 19. So another few things, these are both positive, so I know when I multiply two positive numbers and I add them together, they would still get a positive value. So let's go ahead and look at the factors. I have 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, and you're like, oh, when I add these together, boom, there we go. So you'd have 4 and 15. Now previously, what we would do is we would just say like, oh, x plus 4 and x plus 15 and call it a day. But now we can't do that because I have a value that is not just x squared. So you're always going to put in this box ax squared, Then you're going to put out these little factors right here that we came up with 4x and 15x. You always have x's on these values when we put them in the factor box. And then finally, you're just going to put your c value here, which is 20. So now you're going to factor some values out of your columns and then out of your rows. So if I looked at 15x and 3x squared, I know I can pull out a 3, so they're both divisible by 3, and I can factor out an x out of those as well. Here now I look at 4 and 20, and I know I can pull out a 4. So that means my first factor, which I'll just write down here below, is 3x plus 4. And my next one now, what we're going to do is pull them out this way. And I'll go ahead and do that in orange. So if I look at 3x squared and 4x, I know a x is factored out, it's divisible by. And I know when I look at 15x and 20, I can divide both of those by 5. So then my next one would be x plus 5. Okay, now good news, you could always use FOIL here to double check your answers to make sure you're doing it correct, okay? So let's go ahead and complete the diagram to obtain the correct measures. And I actually already did that, okay? Yeah, so what we would have had here, we would have had the 4x, 5x, and then when we factor these out, we'd factor out a 5, factor out a 4. So those were my new dimensions, 3x plus 4, and x plus 5. Now right here, they're assuming you to use guess and check here, but we're never going to use guess and check. We're actually going to solve for those values by, remember, multiplying values for a times c and adding to b. So make sure we do that, okay? So now let's go ahead and look at this next one. I have dimensions of a rectangle that has an area of 2x squared plus 9x plus 10. So I'm looking for values that multiply to a times c, so 2 times 10 is 20, and then add to 9. All my values are positive, so here we go. Looking at these values, I got 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and you're like, oh, if I add those together, those would add to positive 9 and multiply to 20. Remember, my dimensions are not x plus 4 and x plus 5. I can only do that when I have a coefficient of 1, and here, obviously, I do not have a coefficient of 1. So let's go ahead and plug these values here. Remember, this is always ax squared. Then you're going to use these values and just throw an x on both of them. So we got 4x and 5x. And it doesn't matter if you flip these. So if this was 5x and this is 4x, that's no problem. And then I have a 10 here. So let's go and start with my column by taking out an x squared. And it's essentially, guys, if I look at 2x squared and 5x, what can I divide both of those terms by? Here I got 4x and 10. So here I can pull out a 2. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the rows. Here I can pull out a 2x. And 5x and 10 I can pull out / these are both divisible by 5. So then in green you can get your final factors of 2x plus 5 and x plus 2. Boom. All right. So far so good. Let's go ahead now and what are the sides of a rectangle that have the following area? So remember, guys, a rectangle, to find the area, it's just length times width. So we're literally on these, you're literally just trying to find your length times your width to get this value. So we're going to do the same over here now. So this is, I'm looking for something that multiplies to 100 and adds to negative 29. Now this is our first little different one here because it's multiplying to a positive. So when it multiplies to a positive, I can either do a positive times a positive, but it also has to add to a negative. So my other one would be a negative times a negative would also give me a positive, but would result in a sum of a negative number. So I know both values will be negative. So I just go ahead and look at these. So like negative 1, negative 100, negative 2, negative 50, negative 3, negative 4, and negative 25. Oh, and there we go. Those would add up to negative 29. So negative 4, negative 25. Remember, guys, it's not just x minus 4 or an x minus 25, because we literally need to solve these. So I'm going to put my ax squared here. I'm going to put my two factors here. And then I'm going to put my positive 10 for my c value. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out some values here. And remember, for the sign, is it positive or it's negative? The x squared always takes precedent over everything. And then you look at your x's. Those would take my next hierarchy. And then finally the bottom one would just be this 10. So really quickly, when I look at 25x squared and negative 25, I know they both have an x in common, so I can take out that. 25 and 10 are both divisible by 5, And now you got to decide, is it a positive or a negative 5? Well, since the x squared is positive, this will stay positive. So over here, I look at negative 4x and 10. I can take out a negative 2. Now the column to the left, you look at these. I am going to take out a 2x, and it's going to be positive because the x squared is positive. And then over here, I'm going to take out a negative 5 because negative 25 and 10 are both divisible by negative 5. And it's negative because the x always takes precedent over the constant. Therefore, your two terms are 5x minus 2 and 2x minus 5. Boom. All right, let's go ahead and look at this. It says on this one, what is the area of these rectangles? So same idea. Here we go, I have positive 6 and adds to negative 5. I know that the bigger number is going to be negative because, and the smaller one is going to be, oh, I take that back. I know that these are both going to be negative values because it has to add to a, has to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. So here when I look at 6, I just got 6 and 1, and negative 2 and negative 3, and you're like, oh, here we go. That's my values right there. So we're going to go ahead and put those in my box. So here we go is my A value, my C value, and the factors that I have here. So let's go ahead, we're going to pull out an x squared, we're going to pull out a negative 1, and then we're going to pull out a 3x, and then pull out a negative 2. Okay? So that means my two factors, oops, just pull out an x, not an x squared. That means my two factors are 3x minus 2 and x minus 1. All right, Optima's nephew, Zach, thought it'd be fun by calling it in order for a quilt with an area of negative x squared minus 3x plus 18. To the surprise of Optimus Prime, customer service representative was not stumped by the order and was able to find the dimensions of the quilt. Use the space below to show the dimensions of the quilt. So, when we look at this, one of your first steps is you always want to see is can you factor anything out. In this instance, it wouldn't necessarily matter. You could still do negative 1 times 18 and solve here, but what I personally like to do is I like to factor a negative 1 if my a value is negative to get x squared plus 3x minus 18. And then I know when I have my factors here, I know that in the front, I'm just going to have that negative 1 that I factored out, okay? So let's go ahead and look at this now. I'm looking for numbers that multiply to negative 18 and add to 3. So I know when I have a big number and a small number, when I multiply them, I'm going to get a negative value. When I add them, I'm going to have a positive value. So I know the small one's going to be negative and the big one's going to be positive. So let's go ahead and look at these. So I have 18 and 1, 9 and 2. I got 3 and 6. And then when I look at these, it's like, oh, if I added these together, this would give me my positive 3. So my factors are just 6 and 3. And all we would have here now, guys, it kind of throws us back to the old ones, but I'll have x squared, positive 6x, negative 3x, and my constant at negative 18. So right here I can pull out an x, I'm looking at my rows. Here I can pull out a negative 3, here I can pull out an x, and here I can pull out a positive 6. Remember it's positive because the x always takes precedent over the constant. So then when you have this, you just have x plus 6 and x minus 3. You can leave this as your final answer with the negative out in front, or you can redistribute that negative right back into one of those, either one. I always prefer just to pull it out, guys. Okay? So what you guys can do is you can always factor something out if possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor these, but before we do, we're going to see if we can pull anything out. Alright guys, so now what we're going to do is see what multiplies to negative 45 and adds to negative 4. So let's go ahead and look at these, the factors. So I already know I'm going to have a small number and a big number. And I know the bigger number is going to be negative because when I add the two values, it adds up to negative 4. So I got 1 and negative 45. I got 3 and negative 15. Let's see. Oh, and then I got 5 and -9. You're like, oh, there's my factors right there. So let's go ahead and look at this. I'm going to have 5 and -9. So I'm going to plug my values in here. I'm going to get 3x squared. And then I have -9x. I got 5x. I got -15. So let's go ahead and pull out some values here. Here I'd pull out a 3x. Remember, it's the positive because x squared takes precedent over x. Then on this row, I can take out a 5x. Then coming on up here, I can take out an x. And over here, I would take out a -3. So when I have my two values, I'll go ahead and write it in orange. I have, oops, I took out 5x. It should have just been a 5. I would have 3. I had 3x plus 5 and x minus 3. Boom. I just want you guys to realize that these are all equivalent. I forgot to say this in this lesson. One is just in standard form while the other is in vertex form. Okay, so let's go ahead now and look at this one. This one's pretty straightforward because you're looking for numbers that multiply to 14 and add to -15. So those two values would be -14 and 1 and -1. So right here, I'm going to have my 2x squared. I'm going to have my 7. I'm going to have my -14x and my -1x. So let's go ahead and pull out some values. Here I'd pull out a 2x. Here I'd pull out a -1. Well, here I'd pull out an x. And here I'd pull out a -7. So here I'd have my answer of 2x minus 1. And then I would have a values of x minus 7. Alright, so let's go ahead then and look at this. I have these values that I'm trying to get to multiply to -60 and add to -4. So when I go ahead and look at these, I know once again that my bigger value is going to be negative, while my smaller number is going to be positive. So let's see, I have 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10, and you know my bigger number is negative on all these. So then when I add these together, and you can keep going, but I already saw what I'm looking for, 6 plus -10 would give me my -4. So I know my values here to be -10 and +6. So let's go ahead and plug everything in blue. I would have my 4x squared, have my -15, have my -10, my +6x. So pulling these out here, I can pull out a 2x. Here I can pull out a -5. Here I can pull out a 2x. And here I can pull out a 3. So then when I have this, I have 2x minus 5. And then 2x plus 3. Okay. All right, last one of the day. I am looking for values. This one's going to be tricky. We're going to have -24 times 5, which would be 120, and it'd be -120 and adds to -26. So I know multiplying numbers are going to give me a negative, so I know the small one's going to be positive, and the big one is going to be negative, because when I add them together, I get -26. Okay, so I know this is going to be 1 and 120, -120, 2 and 60, 3 and -40, let's see, 4 and 30. Okay, and I know when I add these together, I'll get my -26. So we're going to have 4 and -30. So then I just plug these in right here. I got 5x, 4x, this is x squared, -30x, and -24. So let's go ahead and start factoring some stuff out. I'm going to factor out a 5x here. Here I can factor out a 4x. Now on this row, I can factor out an x. And here, 30 and -30 and -24 are both divisible by -6. Okay, so that means when I write this out, I have 5x plus 4, and then x minus 6. All right, guys, so hopefully now by the end of this lesson, you just got a bunch of examples on how to factor. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I hope you guys have a great day. Go Carmel Valley.